you shouldn't get screened for cancer until you're like 45 or 50 because the prevalence is so low. And actually, that's false. With the scan, we now find cancer early for folks every week. We have the data to empower individuals to make decisions about their health that will literally save their life.
Hello, and welcome to AI in Healthcare. My name is Mika Newton. I'm your host. Today, I'm super excited to be here with Emi Gal from Ezra. Emi, how are you?
I am great, Mika. Thanks for having me, and it's great to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you again as well. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. First of all, just for our readers, because I know it's new news, it was just covered. I know you from your time at Ezra, and I know Ezra just came together with another organization called Function Health. Could you give us like maybe the 30-second kind of overview of the organizations?
Absolutely. So Ezra, we've created the most accurate, affordable, fastest full body MRI in the world, and powered by a number of AIs. And we have created this kind of incredible business that offers full body cancer screening across the US. And Function has created the most comprehensive, advanced set of lab testing in the US and kind of fully scaled across the country. And Jonathan, who's the founder and CEO of Function, and I were working on a commercial partnership. And that led to a conversation about M&A. And the kind of more we talked about it, the more we realized that the best way to get a look inside the body is combine lab testing with imaging. And so by bringing these two companies together, we can now offer the most comprehensive way to look inside the body across both labs and scans.
I'm very excited about what you guys are doing. I mean, I think the ability for consumers to actually go out and get access to this kind of technology in a consistent way and to be able to access it and use it to drive their own healthcare decision-making and really have just much more empowerment. Super important. Maybe just for our listeners and even for me, because I'm really not an expert in the field, can you talk a little bit about how AI is integrated into MRI? Like where does AI and MRI imaging really come together?
Yeah, so in a number of ways. We at Ezra have 3 AIs that we use at in kind of every step of the screening process. So the biggest cost with an MRI is obviously the scanner itself. And so MRIs are incredible imaging modalities because they allow you to create images of the body with high sensitivity and specificity without exposure to radiation, right? So you can use it as a screening exam done every year for the entirety of one's life without any concern for harmful radiation. The challenge with MRI is that it uses magnetic resonance of the protons in the water in the body to create internal images of the body. The reason that's a challenge is because magnetic resonance is inherently a very noisy environment. And so the way you do high quality scans is by doing every single sequence multiple times in order to average out the noise, because signal will always be the same, noise will be random. By doing the scan multiple times, you're able to average out the noise and create a crisper image.
Got it.
Now, the problem with doing the sequence multiple times is that it will add to scan time, which will add to cost. And so what we've created at Ezra, the first AI that we kind of deploy is called Ezra Flash, and it enables us to acquire MRI images faster and then denoise them and enhance their quality using our AI so that radiologists can actually look at the images and identify kind of small things that they might not be able to identify in like a super noisy image. And so this AI allows us to create MRI scanning protocols that are much faster and then enhance their quality using Ezra Flash AI, which is kind of FDA-cleared and in production. Mm-hmm. Once the scan has been done, it then needs to be analyzed by radiologists. And we're actually the first company to have received an FDA clearance for an AI that assists radiologists when they read prostate MRI scans. And so the AI is designed to assist radiologists with measurements, annotations, segmentations, in order to make their job easier. Kind of a large part of what a radiologist does is just grunt work of measuring things and providing annotations and so on. We think that will ultimately be fully automated by AI across all organs. We have an FDA-cleared AI for prostate there, and we'll be expanding it to other organs. And then the third way in which we use AI is, I don't know if you've ever seen a radiology report, but they're like super technical. They use a lot of jargon. It's kind of unclear what these things mean and what you should do about them. We've created an AI called Ezra Reporter that takes the radiology reports and converts them into plain English, so that anyone can understand what every single finding means. And so by deploying AI at every step of the screening process, it's allowed us to condense the cost, and then we pass those cost savings to consumers.
Got it. Wonderful. So it's a better, cleaner, faster picture, right? Followed up by really highlighting, and it sounds like you started with prostate, but you have this intention of going to other organs too, with kind of pointing to the radiologist to say, look, here's something of interest. This is the measurement across, the different aspects of the image, its size. So all of the standard workflow they would go through for that organ, the MRI. And then I assume it's like a summarization or note that's generated automatically, because I agree radiology reports are actually very hard to consume.
Correct. It's not as much as a summarization as it is a translation. It's kind of taking every single thing that is noted by the radiologist in the radiology report and explaining in plain English what that means.
Got it. And so are all three elements then FDA cleared? Or does all three of them need to go through the same process? Do they go through together, or do you, when you give out regulatory approval, right? And obviously you have to go and validate each step of the way, which I know is super important in AI, right? Is how accurate is it, and does it work? Yes or no? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so the first two are medical devices, class 2 medical devices cleared by the FDA. The third one, the kind of report translation AI, is actually not a medical device. It's purely just like a consumer AI that is able to convert radiology terms into plain English, and that's like not classified as a medical device. Now, for the first two, they are medical devices, Ezra Flash and Ezra Assist, and therefore we need to go through a kind of a very rigorous process to obtain 510(k) clearance with the FDA. And basically the kind of typical journey is that we will have an internal AI team that runs experiments on our training data just to train AIs to achieve our kind of objective. For Ezra Flash, for example, it's just enabling us to enhance the quality of MRI images. We'll run a number of models. It'll generally take us 6 to 9 months to get to the intended result, which is like we have a new scanning protocol that's faster, that yields lower quality images, and then we enhance the quality of those images. Once we've built the model and we internally feel we're happy with, we then have a separate regulatory team that's still kind of part of Ezra team, but it's completely separate from AI team. And that regulatory team runs a number of internal verification and validation steps in order to ensure that the AI model does what we want it to do.
For Ezra Flash then, sorry, just to...
Yeah, go ahead.
You're looking at quality. Are there very standard metrics that the FDA has already established? So in other words, is there precedent, or is this de novo? Like, how are you approaching the comparator here?
Yeah, so there are many predicates that we use. Predicate is kind of the term that the FDA uses for a prior device that was cleared in a similar domain. We now have 3 FDA clearances, and therefore we can use ourselves as the predicate. And so that's kind of a nice thing where we're just like submitting some new work that's based on prior work, and we're using our own product as a predicate. There are metrics that you need to use in order to determine the quality of the AI. For the image enhancement AI, there are 3 metrics that we use: signal to noise ratio, contrast to noise ratio, and a qualitative assessment by the radiologist measured on a Likert scale. And those 3 metrics together need to show improvement across each metric, across the images that we plan to use the AI for.
And in this case, though, it's not organ specific. This is for the overall performance of the imaging equipment itself, right? And the way that it reads. And then, so
just a clarification there, it's not organ specific, but it's region specific. And so we had to go and get clearance initially for neuro, and then we had to go and get clearance for body. And within neuro and body, we had to go and show that we had enough kind of data to show that in a typical population, even with people who have lesions and pathologies in the scans, we can see those in these kind of AI-enhanced MRI images.
Got it. And what should people be Like, why is it concerning, like, versus the beginning? Like, what was the risk that you're trying to balance between kind of the AI, I'm like trying to understand why AI versus not just doing it the old way? Besides, it sounds like cost savings and speed.
I mean, our full body scan for cancer screening is 22 minutes and priced at $499. You cannot do that without AI. It's impossible. And so to acquire, like a typical knee MRI will take 45 minutes, and so like it is, yeah, of course. And so to do what we are able to do, you need these AIs. When you put an AI in production, you need an FDA clearance for it to show that it is safe and effective. Safe means it doesn't put people at harm. Effective means it does what is intended to do. So if we're saying our AI is able to enhance these MRI images, improve their quality in order for radiologists to better see pathology within the images, we need to submit data to the FDA proving that that is true. And so we have a kind of whole team internally that is responsible for running the verification and validation process to submit this data to the FDA and then work with the FDA to answer any questions they might have and so on. It's a very kind of laborious process, and actually I'm super impressed with the FDA people. Like, they know what they're doing. They have biomedical engineers there. They have MRI physicists that they contract. They really kind of dig in and look at all of the data. They ask really good questions. They bring up really interesting points, and they've actually in some ways helped us ensure that our product is always kind of fully buttoned up.
Got it. And I assume there's then versions, right? Like, you kind of lock a version of the AI. It's not like we use AI at my company as well for lots of stuff, but our AI actually kind of evolves and changes sometimes over time. But it sounds like with an FDA process here, it's kind of locked in, at least in that, I would think, version or release.
Correct. It's versioned, and we submit a version, and we get clearance for the version, and then we have new versions. They are working, the FDA is working on some ways to get a kind of more of a blanket clearance for a company for a particular type of device. And we're part of a working group to help with that and kind of get a type of clearance that then allows us to more readily update models.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because we had an experience again here at xCures where we were doing software as a medical device and clinical decision support. And one of the things that we were focused on was kind of continuous learning from single instances, right? That's why we got into it. And I remember some very early discussions with the FDA. Now, we ended up not pursuing that, but probably must be 5 years ago now or so. And it was very hard to understand, at least in the conversation, how one might accomplish this idea of kind of the evolving model inside of the regulatory frameworks. Has that conversation now moved forward?
Oh, yeah. It's pretty straightforward, actually. They call it PCCP, Post-Change Control Plan. And the theory is, hey, if you're a company that is pushing models out, you should be running VMV on each of your models internally to ensure that they're of high quality. We'll give you a clearance that allows you to run those VMV models internally. You don't need to submit them to us every time, but you still need to run them. And we'll come to you and audit to make sure that you're running those VMV models accordingly. And if you are, all is great. If you're not, then, it's a problem. And so
manufacturing process line where you have certain quality thresholds, right? Or certain metrics that if you go out of bounds on.
Correct. Yeah. And you need to still maintain your QMS and maintain your design inputs, design outputs, all of the different steps that go into designing and clearing a medical device. You still need to do. You just don't need to go through the process every time.
And so are you going to see similar now? You talked about having neuro and then body. You've done prostate right here for the metrics, right? Or the actual radiology interpretation of the image itself.
Yep.
How do you now become your own predicate for that as well? Or
Correct.
Do you use your own predicate? Okay, so that was the first one. And then you'll advance.
Yes. And with that one, unfortunately, you have to go organ by organ because you want to show that you have a representative kind of number of pathologies in each of the organs that you're planning to provide AI assistance to radiologists for. And so that is in some ways a much more difficult problem from a data acquisition standpoint because you need to have representative data for every single part of the body.
Got it. So there's a regulatory aspect, right, in this imaging. It sounds like that there are a number of obstacles, first of all, around getting the training data, right, getting enough consistency, building the technology, training and validating. But at the end of the day now, what you all have is an FDA-cleared medical device, right? Two aspects to that device, and soon to be more, coupled with laboratory and diagnostic screening inside of the function health environment, and all essentially at a price that many people, right, could actually be able to afford to go out and access. How did people react to getting access to these technologies? Like, what are your customers telling you about, looking at these reports? And I'm kind of thinking about the third AI here, which you said, which is like the interpretation, because one of the things that people talk about, right, with AI is, if you don't know what to do with it, so, right, it could be actually confusing, right, to many people, or might misdirect you in your approach. So, I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, so, the important thing to note, Mika, is with Ezra, with the scan, we now find cancer early for folks every week. And so every week we're saving lives. With function, with our labs, every week we find super high LDL for folks. We have super high thyroid antibodies. We find kind of these significant things that could impact their health. And so we have the data to empower individuals to make decisions about their health that will literally save their life. The critical thing is, how do you scale the communications and kind of a follow up, what you should do, what you should not do, and so on about these things. And I think AI plays a huge role in that. Ezra Reporter AI, which is our kind of AI that translates radiology reports into plain English, does exactly that. It communicates what the thing means, and then it explains what you should do about it. And we have a scoring system that we call an E-score, an Ezra score, where we rank every single finding on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being informative, 5 being critical and urgent. You need to do something about it right now. And so doing these things allows us to scale communications to consumers without necessarily having a physician do a call with every single customer, which wouldn't be sustainable in scaling up to millions of people. And so we have a bunch more work that we have not yet brought to market that is kind of in the oven, that will enable us to scale AI-powered communications to consumers to kind of even greater length.
I started working on this kind of individual level decision making. We always used to kind of joke that the answer was generally, should you walk or run to your doctor's office? Those were kind of the two options, or call 911. Those were kind of like the three levels. We know we have a shortage of healthcare resources, right, across the country. And so do you find yourself partnering with other entities in the healthcare space where you have kind of a consumer facing side? Do you find yourself in partnership with the actual, let's call it, more established healthcare infrastructure? Or do you find yourself it's almost like, is the consumer world of healthcare kind of evolving on its own outside of the traditional kind of payer-based systems?
Yeah, so both Ezra and Function actually leverage existing healthcare infrastructure to do our tests. Like at Ezra, we don't build any facilities. We partner with existing imaging facilities. Function doesn't kind of run its own labs. It's partnered with Quest. It's one of the largest Quest customers right now to do the labs. And so we leverage existing infrastructure and kind of help fully utilize that infrastructure that's already built. On the follow-up front, our kind of goal is actually to keep people outside of the health system. And so if you can find fatty liver disease in an MRI, you could apply lifestyle interventions that keep you out of a hospital. So like you can, drink less alcohol, eat fewer carbs, lift more weights, and that will help reduce your fatty liver disease, which will help reduce your risk for cirrhosis. It will help reduce your risk for cancer. It will kind of improve your health, make sure that you don't actually end up in the ER 10 years later because you never kind of addressed the problem. And so our kind of goal as a company, Function plus Ezra, is to only push people into the healthcare system when it's absolutely needed, and try to keep people outside of the healthcare system when lifestyle interventions can be applied in order to kind of reduce future risk of disease.
So it's interesting as you talk about that, because it brings to mind, I think one of the points you're making here is actually the diagnostics, right, and equipment use is maybe not fully utilized. So there's elements in our healthcare system that still have capacity, right? Obviously, we can run more lab tests, right?
Yeah.
That's been built to operate at very high scale. It sounds like the imaging, and you're much more familiar with the imaging centers themselves. There are MRI hardware, let's call it, out there, and you're bringing essentially a new market segment to those existing bricks and mortar components.
Yeah.
And so in that way, do you think of yourselves, I guess you must think of yourselves as like a software and AI play more than probably any sort.
Yeah, so we think, like, if you think about how medical decisions are made, 70% of medical decisions are made based on labs, 30% of medical decisions are made based on imaging. And so we want to be the entry point into healthcare when it is needed. And when it is needed, we want to identify those things as early as possible. So we kind of want to be the brand that people trust with their health to stay on top of their health and detect things early so that, they can be addressed when they're most preventable.
Got it. And is there potential actually for healthcare savings to the other parts? I was just wondering, like, if I, let's say, come and have an Ezra scan and get my function testing panel, whatever the specialist panels that I want to add to it, can I just transfer now all of that data? Let's say I get a 5. I hope.
Yep.
Right.
Hope not. Yeah.
Go here. Can I transfer and bring all that data with me now into the healthcare system, or does that all get kind of repeated again?
Yeah. So the idea is to not only help you find these kind of early signs of disease, but also help integrate you into the health system when needed. So in the scan side, when we find what we think is likely cancer, you will need to do a follow-up diagnostic scan, a potential biopsy, and so on. Mm-hmm. However, we do make it easy for you to share that data with a urologist or with a PCP or with the specialist physician so that, you have a better kind of entryway into the healthcare system because you're coming with something that they can look at and kind of analyze. And so really what we want to do is we want to make sure that people utilize health systems when it is needed and that they don't utilize health systems when they can prevent things because we found them or address things without medical intervention because we found them early.
So then if we think again kind of at this kind of overall layer, you're accumulating a lot of data, right? So in terms of the volume, and I think you'd mentioned that you've seen the total volume of people who consumers who are consuming your products and services here has been growing very rapidly. Yeah. You start thinking about that aggregate data. Are you starting to see anything interesting yet from the aggregate data that you didn't expect? Like, are there surprises in, when you reach your whatever 10,000th image of the same thing or 100,000th of, I don't know what the right number. Do you suddenly go, wait a minute, this is something novel that we didn't quite expect to see? Have you seen any?
We have, actually. So we noticed maybe like a year ago in the Ezra data that there is a higher prevalence than we expected and that the market expected of predominantly gastro-related cancers in younger people. Mm-hmm. And so we just saw it. We saw many people in their 30s who found kidney cancer or adrenal gland cancer or liver cancer, pancreatic. And we were kind of not expecting to find so many cancers in young people. And so we started looking at it and it was an interesting insight. We've more recently started seeing from other publications and so on, or from other kind of systems, that they too are seeing increased prevalence of cancer in younger populations. And their hypotheses now as to, why. Is it the food system? Is it the supply chain kind of being not great and so on? And so a big important insight was, the general kind of consensus is that you shouldn't get screened for cancer until you're like 45 or 50 because the prevalence is so low. And actually, that's false. People have cancer. It's just they're asymptomatic because it's so early, and they end up finding it in their 40s and 50s. But actually, that cancer has been developing for 5 years. And so the conclusion we drew from that is that we should continue to push for people getting screened as early as possible, and then doing longitudinal monitoring over time to ensure that you're always kind of giving yourself the best shot at finding cancer early.
And did you find when you were doing this, looking at those earlier populations, was there a correlation between the younger age and earlier staging as well? Like, is it,
yes.
Or you were finding stage 1, stage 2?
Almost always.
Almost always.
Mm-hmm. So
they're technically possibly preventable, right?
Oh, absolutely preventable. Like if you look at cancer by organ, the survival rates for pretty much all cancers are in the 80s, 90s, 99% for early stage cancer. Mm-hmm. They are in the 20s, 15s, 10s, single digits for late stage cancers. And so we know how to treat cancer when it's early, still within the capsule of origin, not expanded regionally or metastatically. We don't know how to treat cancer when it's metastatic, not for curing you, just for extended life. And so the best time to address cancer is when it's super early. The best way to find it early is aggressive screening.
So in the screening world, right, there's these kind of things like the GRAIL multi-cancer detection test. There's a whole bunch of blood tests, right, associated with this. And you've obviously focused at Ezra on imaging. Can you talk a little bit about the maybe pros and cons of both? How do you think these two technologies interact with each other?
Yeah, I've thought long and hard about this. And actually, when I started Ezra, my goal was not to build an MRI imaging company. My goal was to help people find cancer early. And I spent almost a couple of years doing research and went through a dozen ideas on how you could solve the problem. And the first idea was actually liquid biopsies. This is ctDNA. This is 2016. This is before GRAIL launched. And I met with a genomics expert at Caltech and was like, here's what I'm thinking, liquid biopsies for early cancer detection and so on. And he was like, Emi, he sat me down and was like, I'm here to dissuade you from going this path. It's going to take us a decade to prove it, but we're going to see in a decade that sensitivity for early stage cancer detection using liquid biopsies is always going to be too low because you don't have enough DNA in the bloodstream originating from the tumor to be able to actually get high sensitivity. As a result, you look at GRAIL now, and for stage 1 cancer, they have a 16% sensitivity. So they have an 84% false negative rate at early stage. Not really conducive with early detection of cancer. Now, that's improving, and some of their organs they cover have higher sensitivity, and even though they have very low sensitivity, they have very high specificity. So I think there's value in GRAIL and liquid biopsies and so on. However, I think the ideal screening protocol is one in which you combine imaging, you combine liquid biopsies, and you combine kind of protein biomarkers, so like a PSA blood test and so on. And you bring those three things together and you really get the best chance at finding cancer early with high sensitivity and specificity. And actually, that's exactly what we do at Function Plus Ezra now. We do labs, we do scans, and we're the largest referrer of GRAIL test as an add-on through Function. And so kind of we're bringing these three things together, creating the best cancer screening protocol.
So it's what my team knows is my favorite strategy for everything, which is we should just do everything. Like when they're like, should we go A or B? I'm like, well, we have to do both, right?
Yes.
So thinking about this now on the imaging side, so one of the things I've heard that is scary for people is to let's get a signal and then not be able to find it or do anything about it. So imagine getting like a ctDNA test that says you have cancer, and then you go for, the diagnostic workup afterwards, and nobody can really tell you for sure if you have or don't. And so this is just like creates a huge amount of anxiety for people then on the other side of the problem. And so, we always hear about that as like, well, don't test for things you don't want to know about, right? Or you can't do anything about. And so do you get that kind of sentiment in your communities who work with you? Or
I mean, it's why imaging and liquid biopsies work so well together, right? Because you get a signal from a GRAIL test that you might have cancer, and you pair that with the full body scan that's going to see the tumor. And it's kind of like ideal protocol. With Ezra, we get the reverse of that. We get, oh, you're going to do these scans and you're going to find all of these things and you're going to have to follow up with all of these things. And that's a bit of a kind of, the people who say that have not thought about the problem long and hard enough, because you don't go from screening exam to biopsy or surgery. You go from screening exam to diagnostic exam to potentially biopsy to then surgery. Mammogram is a great example. You do breast screening mammogram. Then if you have a positive finding, you get a diagnostic mammogram, you get an ultrasound, you get a breast MRI, then you get a biopsy, then you get treated. And so in reality, most of the findings in a full body MRI, you're not going to follow up on. You're just going to have implicit follow up by just doing a longitudinal MRI scan every year. And then only for the findings that are likely or very likely to be cancer do you then go and do a follow-up. But the follow-up will always be a diagnostic scan. And for most people, that's where it will stop, because the diagnostic scan will rule in or rule out disease. And so we are starting to see internally data that like false positives are like a non-issue if you do full body scans correctly. And at one point, we'll be ready to publish some of that data.
And I assume you can find or your AI is identifying very small, very early stage cancer, right? In
very, very early stage, yes. And the benefit of using AI, for example, for prostate is that you have the ability to track lesions over time very minutely. So you can segment a lesion and monitor its progression over time. It will help you determine whether the lesion is benign or malignant, because a benign lesion will just stay the same. A malignant lesion will grow. And so if you are able to longitudinally monitor these lesions super accurately, it helps actually figure out which ones are problematic and which ones aren't.
Right. So do you think the overall cost, so one of the barriers, right, to getting access is obviously the cost. It sounds like, your costs are in the, call it $500 to $1,000 range is what I'm kind of have heard in general of around that space. Are those going to continue to come down, right? And, not like as we do higher volume, because that's still frankly out of reach for a good segment of the population. Won't spend $1,000 on consumer health screening. That's a lot of money for a good number of people.
Yeah. So our goal is very much affordability. And, before Ezra, full body scans were $20,000. And we were kind of the first company in the US to launch a $2,500 scan. And then a couple of years ago, we launched a $1,500 scan. And a month ago, together with Function, we launched a $500 full body scan. And so we brought it from $20,000 to $500 in about 7 years. And
is it the same scan? The $20,000 scan is now $500, or is it a different scan from?
It is. When it comes to cancer, it's pretty much the same scan. So, there are some things that you get if you can buy more expensive scans, like you can get spine, or you can get hips, or you can get knee evaluation, you can get like MRA for aneurysms, you can get a bunch of other things that all add time and cost and money. But if you're purely comparing a $20,000 cancer-focused scan from, 10 years ago to our $500 scan now, they're essentially the same thing. They look through all of the different organs where you might be able to identify cancer using MRI.
That's fantastic. And do you think there's still room in that curve?
I think it's starting to asymptote. However, I think there's still a little bit more work to be done. We're certainly working on that at Ezra to make it even more affordable.
Got it. And because you don't kind of make the hardware, does the hardware have because I assume when, you're a hospital system or an imaging center and you buy an MRI, you try to use that MRI till the day it doesn't work anymore. Is there any issues?
7 years. Yeah. So the average cycle for an MRI machine is 7 years. And it's interesting because a lot of we've kind of also hit the asymptote on how much you can push the hardware on MRI. Majority of scanners out there are 3 Tesla scanners, which is really the highest we'll go for imaging humans at scale. There are also these 7 Tesla scanners that you can use for neuroimaging and so on. But at 3 Tesla, if you go beyond that, in a lot of parts of the body, you'll start seeing kind of imaging artifacts and distortions caused by the strength of the magnetic field interacting with the movement of the body. And so it's really kind of 3 Tesla MRIs, I think, is what we're going to be stuck with for a while in terms of imaging the human body. That said, most of the innovations now being is going into software and AI and technology. And so work we're doing at Ezra, but also work that manufacturers are doing, OEMs, other startups, are all kind of pushing towards faster and faster scanning on MRI, not as a function of better hardware, but as a function of better software.
And is the primary driver of cost the amount of time you spend in the MRI? I assume that...
Primarily, yeah.
Okay.
It's that and the radiologist cost.
Got it. On the both sides. Wow, this is fantastic. So it sounds like this era of consumer-driven, AI-powered medicine is really coming. It sounds like you guys have made some incredible progress, actually just making it, number one, accessible to people, and I think even more importantly, useful, right? Because, again, I always run this thing of that I've signed up for many things over the course of my life that were really interesting, but honestly not that useful at the end of the day with genomics testing and et cetera.
Yep.
But this sounds like you're really kind of where the rubber hits the road, helping people detect cancer earlier, understand their trends in their health from their diagnostics, kind of take preventive care against it. And it's starting to really happen. And that might actually move the needle for all of us in terms of prevention and healthcare costs. Am I seeing this right?
It's exactly right, Mika. That's the vision. And, we with our mission at Ezra from day one has been to help everyone in the world detect cancer early. The function mission is to help 8 billion people live 100 healthy years. And so with labs and imaging, both done affordably and at scale because we leverage existing infrastructure, we really think we can help millions of people get a look inside the body to ensure that if there's anything lingering that can kill them, they find about it early so that they can make changes in order to kind of live longer, healthier lives.
Emi, thank you. Thank you for doing that. That's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Mika.
I think we should just leave it here because that vision for me is perfect. I think that's something that all of us have been hoping would come out of technology for some time. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing with us. It was delightful to have you here.
Thank you, Mika. This was fantastic. I really enjoyed it.